Hello everyone, Tallie and Farrell here from Board of It.
And today we're going to review the game that every board gamer wants underneath their tree this Christmas, Lost Ruins of Arnak.
Oh my god, you didn't!
Just as a disclaimer, I don't know if that's true, but there has been a lot of hype about this game. So, Lost Ruins of Arnak, it's a mashup of genres. It has deck building, it has worker placement, and some tough resource management. You'll take on the role of an expedition to a newly discovered island, and the goal is to be best expedition out of anyone. You kind of pillage the island a lot and get victory points for it. The win condition and how you win is a little disconnected from the theme, I think.
You'll spend your time discovering ancient burial sites and fighting off the guardians of those sites.
Give me that treasure, Guardian. I'm coming for it.
You'll also be obtaining items and artifacts in order to improve your personal deck. You'll also be doing some good old-fashioned scientific research. Just ask this scientician. Lost Ruins of Arnak is quite straightforward, and part of its charm is how easy it is to pick up. On your turn, you'll have 6 options. You can pass to end the round for you. You can spend a worker to go to a discovered site, but you must pay a travel cost, which you pay by discarding cards. You can also discover a new site, which costs you compasses and the travel costs, but you do gain idols, which are worth VPs in end scoring. You'll also draw a new site tile, which shows you what resources are available at that site, and you'll also draw a guardian tile.
Now, you have to overcome the island guardians, and you kind of do this by just paying randomized resources, whatever it says on the guardian, and then you get the guardian tile. Now, these give you a one-time boon and are worth 5 victory points each at the end of the game. However, you don't have to fight them, and you can still go to spaces where there are guardians to get the resources. It's just that if you end the round in a space with a guardian, you will gain a fear card. And fear cards clog up your deck, and they're worth negative victory points at the end of the game. Now, other things you can do on your turn include going to the marketplace to buy items or artifacts, and these go in your deck and will provide you with different options or actions to take. And you could also play a card on your turn.
Lastly, you can do research, which is essentially spending resources to move up the research track in order to then get more resources back. Once you reach the top of the research track, you'll gain a ton of victory points, and it also gives you the option to essentially spend more resources to buy victory points.
Now, the game will last for 5 rounds, at which point you'll score up, and you'll be scoring for bought cards, idols, guardians, research track, and any victory point tiles you've bought.
One mechanic we do like is the idols. On your player board, you have 4 empty spaces, and you can use an idol to put in one of those spaces to gain some extra resources, which might just be enough to have an extra turn or 2. However, this is at a cost of victory points, because for each uncovered space at the end of the game, you score VP, so by moving the idols there, you could be costing yourself victory points. It creates this fun dilemma, similar to the dilemma of should you spend a card for its travel value or its action. Arnak is great at creating those moments and will have you thinking turns ahead to ensure that your plan can come to fruition.
One thing we just want to say straight up is that Lost Ruins of Arnak is a fun game. We really enjoy playing it, and when you're playing it, you don't often come up against the walls of the game. You know, because you're in your own little world, you're trying to get a few more turns out of your meager resources and cards. You're trying to gather some victory points, and it becomes like this fun little puzzle of how to extend your round, basically. But we're saying this now just because we worry it might seem like we're kind of bashing the game a bit. But there are definitely a few mechanisms to pick apart in the upcoming sections. But we just want to state now that when you're in the game, it is very enjoyable and fun to us.
First off, Arnak has a really strange feel about it, perhaps because of the mashup of systems. It's really friendly and welcoming, but it does become really tight and not in the usual way of worker placement. Rather, it's the resource management that is really tight. There's not much wiggle room to get what you want because there's just not much option of what you can do. You only get 2 workers, which are your main way of gathering resources. Then you might be able to eke out a few more by playing a card, using an assistant, or researching, and you might just get 1 or 2 more turns, but that's it. You're always going to be trying to figure out how to get that one resource that you really need, but if you've used your paltry 2 workers, then you're going to have to get creative, and it becomes a bit of a puzzle.
One thing Lost Ruins of Arnak is crying out for is a system of trading stuff into things. This is because you can only trade resources through the use of certain bonus tiles or idols, and you can only trade in a hierarchical system, so an arrowhead to a ruby, for example. But what the game really needs is a loot system, like a ruby down to an arrowhead and a money or something. And this is because the Lost Ruins makes you pay very specific costs to defeat guardians or go out the research track, but doesn't provide you with specific ways to get them, and sometimes not even lateral ways to get them. And a lot of this comes down to the randomness of the setup. The cards that are in the marketplace, the assistants available, and what tiles you draw are all random. So if you have to depend on what the game gives you and you're last in the turn order, you can not be able to get a resource through bad luck and other players going to the space you need for literally rounds. And I've ended games of Lost Ruins with numerous top shelf resources. And I find that really criminal because I couldn't do anything only because I had no way of gaining one basic resource. And that would have unlocked like 3 turns for me. And it just makes the game sometimes become like an exercise in frustration rather than being a fun little puzzle. Coming on to the cards, we personally find the artifact cards a little bit useless. They're definitely too expensive in our opinion. They often cost between 3 or 4 compasses, and for that price you could discover a new site, and if you could defeat the Guardian you would get 8 VP for that, which then means whatever meager reward the artifact card offers isn't very good in comparison. And the thing is that if you buy it and it goes into your deck and it comes up again and you want to play it, you have to pay a tablet for the privilege, making it even more expensive. In our games, they just don't get used a lot. And usually if someone buys one, it's because it has some resources on it that people need in that exact situation, not because it's something they want to draft into their deck.
Items, on the other hand, are quite useful. Money is mainly used to buy items, although you should keep some aside for researching or defeating guardians. But this means that it never feels like you're undercutting yourself to buy more cards when you buy items like it does when you buy artifact cards. Also, we personally find the Artem cards very charming.
Yeah, so we should probably talk about the game mechanics because, it's being sold as a mashup of genres, deck builder and worker placement. And it does those and it combines them well. However, they are really simplified. It's kind of like, my first worker placement game or my first deck building game. If we just take the deck building, for example, you don't have any control over what cards come out when. And, if you buy an item card, you'll likely draw it at the beginning of the next round. That's fine. Anything else, a toss-up. And after you've bought those cards and it's been the next round, you don't know when they're going to come up. Secondly, you can't exile cards whenever you want. It's very situational, and you could go through a whole game without ever getting a chance to do that, which then means you can't really build your deck as much as you'd think you could because you can't get rid of any cards. So we've also found this issue is that if you buy cards continuously throughout the game, it's just kind of, the card counting way it works is that you tend to have a really terrible final round because you draw all of your starting cards, or at least mostly draw your starting cards. And, in the inverse, what we've found is that if you only buy like 2, 3, 4 cards, that you tend to always have a really good round the whole time, especially the final round, because you're always getting some good cards that you've bought. And, can you really call it a deck building game if you should not buy as many cards as you want?
In a similar vein, the worker placement is super limited. You only get 2 workers and you'll never have more than 2. So this means that it's never that competitive for the spaces because the spaces never really come close to being filled up. Also, we find that usually players try to save a worker to discover a new site rather than taking the space of a site that is already discovered. What we will say about these limited mechanics is that we really think it's an amazing game for introducing people into the hobby. We really think it's up there with Ticket to Ride and games in that space that everyone should play on their journey into board games. The mechanics that are covered here are going to be seen time and time again in more complex games, whereas here they are massively simplified. And most importantly, this game is fun. No thrills, straightforward fun. And we can really see new hobbyists playing this and getting really into it.
However, it might be a little limiting if you're an experienced gamer. You can only really get game-changing victory points through the collection of idols, guardians, and researching. So this tends to mean that once you've gathered your resources for the round, you will only ever put them into exploration or into the research track. And this problem is kind of furthered by the fact that the research track only pays off if you commit to it and go all the way to the top. You know, you can get situations where at the end of the game, you're getting minimal points despite having put 15 resources into the research track because you've only got halfway up, whereas you can get 11 points for going to a top level dig site, spending way less resources and just collecting the idols and defeating the guardian. One thing we just wanted to say is that we've seen other reviewers and the description of this game make the claim that every play is going to be really unique and no two plays will ever feel the same. And this just isn't something that we feel is true. And I think they're referring to the vast amount of variable setup because you'll randomize the card decks, you'll randomize the idols and bonus tiles, you'll randomize the dig sites and the guardians. But lots of games have variable setup and it's just how you introduce replayability. And this doesn't really feel different to other games in that way. And in fact, we think it's ironic that they make this claim because this is quite a simplified game in some ways. So we feel like experienced gamers would very quickly get tired of this if they played it a lot in a short time. But we're not bashing the game. It's just that we've seen this said so many times that we thought that we should give our opinion on it. And it is just our opinion. But one thing that we do really like is that the board is double-sided and each side changes the research track and the travel costs of certain locations. And it's really cool because each side gives you a different puzzle to work out. It pushes you in different directions and you make different decisions. But again, this is all within the confines of the game.
One thing that can't be denied is the care that's gone into making this game. The box and components ooze with theme, and the artwork that's all over everything is quite evocative. One thing that we also really love is the fact that the board has special places for each of the cards, resources and tokens, which is a brilliant touch and isn't done enough. It's so much more pleasant than just having resources out all over the table. In addition, the components are really good quality and they really strengthen the game. The rubies, arrowheads and tablets are really unique and each feels totally different. But the low point of the components has to be the explorers, which are pretty bland and blocky. They could have been stolen from an Alexander Pfister game. What I like about Lost Ruins is that it's quite therapeutic to play almost, like with the, figuring out which resources you need to get, thinking turns ahead, and just seeing your plan come together is really satisfying. And for me personally, I lean towards games that aren't so player-player interaction heavy because quite honestly, it makes me a bit stressed when you spend turns and turns having a strategy and then someone, Farrell, comes and ruins it. Whereas with Lost Ruins, that doesn't happen so much. Also, I can beat him at it.
So, final summary. This is absolutely a fun game. However, personally for me, I feel like it's a kind of game where once the newness is worn off, if someone said to me, hey, let's play it, I would be like, not because I don't want to play it, but because I just wouldn't want to play it over other games, better games. But once I was playing it, I would be having a lot of fun. We think that, if you're trying to get someone into the hobby, or if you're new to the hobby, this is a great buy.
It's absolutely excelled at simplifying concepts that are seen in many other different types of board games. It's easy to learn and it has a well-written rulebook. However, if you're a more experienced gamer and you have games like Res Arcana, Maracaibo or Viticulture, we don't think there's anything here that you don't already have. If you enjoyed this video, we'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to our channel for regular board game reviews, always with a little hint of doggo. And we also did a playthrough of Lost Ruins, so if you'd be interested in seeing how it plays out, we'll leave the video at the end of this review.